I read such nonsense on social media about these vaccines from ignorant, ill-informed people.
Opening yourself up to litigation if you start to discriminate against your employees and mandate vaccinations.
Okay, but why? Listen, you make perfectly valid points, but why should I, as a customer, not have the right to use a company like Pimlico Plumbers where I know that they've all been vaccinated? Because I would prefer to do that. Actually, turns out there's not much difference between whether you've had the jab or not for transmission. And at that point, I realised everything I've been saying was completely wrong.
Thank you so much for giving us a chance to see it firsthand and to get the injection.
I've just decided that I've had COVID a couple of times and I'm done with the vaccines.
I have an appointment to get the vaccine tomorrow. It is the Pfizer vaccine, but I can't care less whether it's Moderna or Pfizer.
Just give it to me.
Yeah, just get it to me. And I had a horrible reaction to the vaccine. I have a son that had a terrible reaction to it. And I'm really very, very concerned. Making a healthy person sick because of something, an intervention we do as physicians, do no harm, is completely violated by the COVID vaccine. We are making a healthy person sick.
We should try to encourage the unvaccinated to get vaccinated, all of us.
They really aren't that critical for those that are under 50 or younger.
We need to be insisting on people being vaccinated.
Dr. Phelps, good morning. You and your wife both suffered vaccine injuries.
Return to primary school classrooms should be delayed until vaccination levels are optimal. But I think it's very important with this new vaccine, it's only been around for less than 2 years, that it's time that we put some research funding and some real effort into looking at the causes for the vaccine adverse events that people are experiencing.
If you get vaccinated, you protect yourself, you protect the people around you, and you help us get out of this pandemic a little bit faster.
If the government had just said, hey, these are novel vaccines, we don't, there will be reactions, let's just have a program in place to deal with them.
Right. The science is clear, Tony. Well, let me tell you something. Sean, I can't help you because I'm no clinician. I'm sick myself.
The messaging should be, get a vaccine because it's good for you to do it. It works. You're not going to have to be doing anything like abnormal. You can live your life. I mean, that has got to be what the message is. I'm announcing a petition with the Supreme Court of Florida to impanel a statewide grand jury to investigate any and all wrongdoing in Florida with respect to COVID-19 vaccines.
Most important to me was seeing one individual after another embrace vaccine with confidence.
I have a number of people that are quite ill, and they never had COVID, but they are ill from the vaccine.
Those who choose not to get vaccinated need to, there needs to be some sort of incentive stick, perhaps, through the current programs, including No Jab, No Pay.
I think as a general principle, we could all agree that mandates have a time-limited role in a pandemic.
The mandates? Yes, I think we did get that wrong.
The Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine to be authorised by the UK authorities just after Christmas. And I don't think it's too much of an exaggeration to say that this is going to change the world.
Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine has been branded as defective. What is happening now with the COVID vaccines, as an example, indicative of this new culture of cover-up and secrecy.
Fortunately for this country, the procurement and rollout of the vaccine has been such an excellent job.
Can we please have a statement now from the government suspending these experimental mRNA vaccines before any more death and harm is done to our population?
There is some clearly irrational reasoning behind why people don't want to take the vaccine, which is based upon very blatant false information that's circulating on social media. When you look at all of the drugs out there that people are taking, vaccines by far are the safest.
So this is perhaps the greatest miscarriage of medical science, attack on democracy, damage to population health, and erosion of trust in medicine that we will witness in our lifetime.
You're muted.
I thought I unmuted it. I didn't. I actually hit the button, but I didn't. Thank you, Michael. So look at that. The experts are finally listening to the non-experts who were right all along. We were telling them, don't get this thing. There's no testing. And the experts are all going, hey, you know when we said that was misinformation, disinformation? Well, it's information and information.
There you go. And, you know, the government likes to get ahead of things before they actually do their research, before they actually listen to the real scientists and researchers and doctors and the boots on the ground. They like to get ahead of things with their own communication strategies. And therefore, they have a tendency to work on modeling and assumptions versus real live data. And this is what you get for it.
Exactly.
All these people putting up bullshit propaganda, and then after the fact, have to go back and say, oops, we were wrong 2 years after the fact.
It's not by the censoring people and calling them anti-vaxxers and all that stuff. And we've known for 4 years that we were right all along. Don't take this thing. There's no testing. Has it been tested for cancer? No carcinogenic properties have been tested. Has it been tested for genotoxicity? Nope, has not. Has it actually secretly hurt people and we're going to cover up the results?
Yep.
Yeah, it has. So yeah, that's so there we go. So the experts are now going, hey, we got it wrong. Well, no, you were bullies and jerks about it.
But they didn't really get it wrong. They just followed the propaganda machine ahead of the actual facts. And instead of actually going to the research and reading the research like many of us did, who went, no, alarm bells, don't do it. We actually went to the websites and we did the research, and hence we had the information ahead of us, and we didn't have to listen to what the government propaganda machine sent to the media that sent out on ships galore to feed down people's throats and fear porn them. And that leads us into tonight's show, because lo and behold, they're doing it again.
Yeah, you struggle to find what you should do on a show, what's really going to hit home, and then all of a sudden something just drops right in your lap. And you're like, well, the show is just going to take care of itself tonight. And that's what happened to us yesterday. Our good friend Sandy Sable tweaked us on Twitter and sent us a tweet from Dr. Sam Bailey, who did a Substack on Christine Massey. No, not that Christine Massey, a different Christine Massey. The Christine Massey who's the researcher and analyst for one of the provinces in Canada that is on the Public Health Board. No, not that one. The Christine Massey who's actually a researcher and analyst for our side, who was exposing the government. How they got those two mixed up, we don't know. But they sent a Zoom invite to the wrong Christine Massey, who said, well, thank you very much. And yes, I will record your private meeting. Teresa Tam, Bonnie Henry, Kieran Moore. Yeah, they're all there.
They did her the favor of not having to request an FOIA, because she is famous for her FOIAs.
Right.
And that's probably how the government got her email versus the right Christine Massey.
Yeah.
So she didn't have to do an FOIA for this, because they invited her to the meeting.
Right. Somebody who was in charge of answering those FOIs are also in charge of probably putting that Zoom meeting together. So good lesson in that. Right now, if you have a common name, and by common name, not Chris Villek or not Jody Ledgerwood, if your name is Bill Smith, Dave Smith, Cynthia Smith, there's probably more last names than Smith.
Probably. If your name just happens to be Justin Trudeau, hey, send an email, send an FOI request, send something to all the MPs.
Start contacting people in the
different departments.
All of them. Get an email back from them. And next thing you know,
you're invited to their top secret propaganda meetings.
Right.
How can we hurt the people next? Well, we're going to go through how they plan on hurting us next.
Yeah, but I think this might have been an act of God, because now that this stuff is out, are they actually going to be able to pull off the same shenanigans? And we're not sure that they are. But first, before we get to that, how are the Liberals doing?
Well, they're kind of being destroyed not only in the House, but also in the media, and rightfully so. And that being said, I don't think any of the parties are being represented properly in the House. It just looks like a big, giant kindergarten class gone amok instead of professional adults that are earning over $200,000 a piece.
Right. And so something's happening. We're starting to look at what's happening, but something's happening. And here's the Liberals in a press junket, I don't know, a couple days ago. And this is them touting the fact that Pierre Poilievre has not said he will not ban abortions. And well, he has. He has said he's not coming after that. No, he has not. And so here's the Liberals doing their last like Hail Mary and trying to resuscitate a dead body. I have no idea. There we go.
Ms. Cox and members of the Liberal Party, and we've sent a letter to the Leader of the Opposition asking him to be very clear with Canadians, and in particular with Canadian women, on what he would do to defend a woman's right to choose. We've seen that his caucus, there are many anti-choice caucus members. We've seen some of their actions recently, including MP Kathy Wagenthal, who at the pro-life rally held here last week said that women who have abortions end up needing redemption, forgiveness, and needing God. We as women want to know whether the Leader of the Opposition will ensure that his caucus does not put forward legislation that in any way impinges on women's rights and freedoms, in particular bodily autonomy.
Well, now, before we get any farther with that, would that also include vaccines?
I believe that would include vaccines because it's, again, telling people what they can and cannot do with their bodies.
Would that be including a woman being able to be in a safe space like a change room without an intact male staring her down?
I believe that would be the exact same because, now the woman has to feel like she has to hide her body and hide in a bathroom, or not even change in the bathroom anymore, but go home because there's men staring at her.
Would that also be a little ironic because you want to defend a woman's rights when you can't even define what a woman is?
Oh, I forgot. They don't know how to define a woman anymore.
If that, as much as that frustrates me, I love how the news, the journalists who've been sleepy for so long, all of a sudden they're wild dogs.
His office has already said that. It's not clear. His office has said that they're not going to use the notwithstanding clause on abortion to regulate abortion. He said he's not going to legislate it, introduce it, pass it. So what part's not clear?
That's his government. There are ways that you can have private members' bill that are introduced as well. And the
point of fact, a private members' bill is the hardest one to get into the House.
Exactly.
So there are so many protocols. Those are the ones that get killed the most. And besides, it would have to go through the House. It would have to go through readings. It would have to go through the press fire.
So who cares if it gets introduced? We know many bills die on their first reading or sometimes second reading.
We know that.
So it doesn't matter.
And I think she knows that too.
She does. They're just deflecting.
risk is still there. He voted against Morgentaler back in 2008 as person. I mean, he is, in every sense, that caucus and that leader has made women wonder about the risk that they're going to be taking with this leader. And I want him to come out and unequivocally say that they do everything to defend a woman's right to choose, that they will not allow their members to come forward with private members' bills and put forward bills that suggest that a fetus is a person, which is a backdoor way of, again, addressing this issue.
Fetus is a person. I actually find it a little more disturbing that the Liberals want to decide who is and who isn't a person.
When they can't decide who is or who isn't a woman.
Exactly.
The Harper government had 10 years. I know you weren't here. Many of us were. 10 years in power. They had 4 years as a majority, didn't move one bit. And they had private members who wanted to do things. Guys, you are all 30 points down the polls. I'm looking at some of you will not get reelected if there was an election this fall. This is the most cynical play to just throw the abortion scare tactic. Would you like to respond to that observation?
Absolutely. It's
Please.
not a scare tactic. We've seen what's happened in the States. Do people really think Roe versus Wade would have been overturned? Do we think what was happening there was going to happen? I've been in the women's movement for over 50 years. It is not a scare tactic. Things are going backwards, not only in Canada, but around the world. And these are real risks for Canadians. We need to know very clearly that that party, policies put forth at the convention, individual members are not going to introduce things because we do not want to go the same way as the United States. So it is not a scare tactic. It is a very strong concern. And I may not have been here then, but I was other places working on women's rights, okay? So do not use that as a reason why it's not a scare tactic.
Last question. Let's just put it back the other way. The government hasn't also legislated to protect abortions either, right? So why doesn't your government introduce legislation to make it harder for that to get rolled back?
The lady in the black
if there is
nodding her head.
a conservative
Right.
government.
Yeah, well, yeah.
You do not want to legislate woman's body.
Mhm.
You
But
do
they
not
already did.
legislate
With the vaccines.
Of course
they
they
already
did.
did.
Yeah. And so they're saying, well, protect the rights then. Protect those rights. And she's like, no, you don't want to do that either. That's a solution. Shush now.
woman's body. That is not, you make sure that you have access to abortion. You don't want to legislate anybody's body, particularly a woman's.
Agreed.
The right to choose, like you're calling.
No,
to do?
you don't want to legislate your ovaries, your uterus. No, that is not the way that you protect women's rights.
Wait a minute, though. If she's saying like enshrine abortion laws even harder, she goes, no, you don't want to do that. Wait a minute. We have abortion laws. We have more laws that say we're going to provide abortion to other people around the world. We already have those laws. So those legislating, what she's calling legislating ovaries, those are already there. So how does that logic even work?
Well, and we've got lots of bills and legislation on the books already that protect supposedly our bodies, even though we know in the last 4 years, those protections have been
Mean Squatsky.
flushed down the toilet.
Nothing.
And with what we're going to show you tonight, it looks like they're looking at more flushing down the toilet. So that's why we're playing this clip, because, you know, the liberals are all up in arms right now about legislating our bodies, what they can do, what they can't do with them. And yet we run into this meeting where that's exactly what they're discussing, how to force vaccinations yet again.
Wow. Yeah, that's a bit of a jump, but yeah,
we know that's where it's
based
going.
on the past. The past is a good predictor of the future. So yeah, before we do that, hey, it's time we checked in. A small minute with the garden towers.
And welcome to your weekly update on the tower garden growth. Remember, go to tfmreport.com, partners page, to get your tower gardens. Here we are 1 week later, and look at the growth of the tomatoes and the cucumbers. And even our strawberries are starting to take off. That was last week.
Yeah.
These we showed you last week.
That
We
one.
just planted them in, and look how tall they are already.
No seeds even last year. No.
And
no
of course, our lettuce tower is doing incredible with the butternut squash and the honeydew and cantaloupe on the bottom. We are giving you our weekly update.
So those, actually, I was quite shocked at how far along we've come with those things.
Chris said to me, we just did them last week. Do we really need to do an update? And I said, I'm telling you, there's been so much more growth between last Thursday and this Thursday. We do. And he didn't believe me until he looked at last week's footage and this week's footage. So there you go. You want a great way to grow food inside, away from all the chemtrails that they're spraying down on us. The tower gardens are a great way. We use them ourselves. We love them. And our lettuce is actually now ready after, what has it been, 2-3 weeks? It's now ready to be used in salads.
Yeah, we're going to start having salads. pretty quick.
Talents. Now back to the show.
Back to the show. So, yeah, if in case you're just joining us now and you've cut away from the Shadow Davis show or the Kevin J. Johnson show, good life choice. Welcome. So we covered it a little bit earlier in the introduction. We got a tweet from our friend Sandy Sable, Canadian truth seeker on Twitter. And she sent us a Substack from Dr. Sam Bailey. Sam Bailey did a Substack on Christine Massey, who was she's a researcher that is trying to expose the COVID shots, the COVID mismanagement, the lies about the pandemic. She's been working really hard. I'm not sure what her organization is with or who she's with, but anyway, she's working really hard. Now, she happens to have the same name as a Christine Massey in the public health, in Canada Public Health. And I'm not sure exactly where she works, but she got sent the other Christine Massey's invite to Zoom. So the non-governmental Christine Massey got to sit in on a government meeting with no filters and recorded the whole thing. And now she just dropped it yesterday. Turns out she's been sitting on it for 2 weeks. And I said yesterday, you know what I would have done? I sat on it for a couple of weeks to see if I got another invite. And Jody's like, look at the date. So that's what she was doing. And she was probably checking with lawyers, but but she released the whole Zoom thing. And so, like we say, sometimes the shows just write themselves, and we're going to pick out a few key moments. Everybody's kind of going over this now. A lot of people are picking this.
They're starting to see
carcass clean a little bit, but we're picking up things that I don't think other people have been talking about yet as well. So where do we start? I think
where do you want to start?
Well, let's start with this guy. Now, this guy is Michael Shearer.
Oh, should we introduce what the meeting was about?
Oh,
that's
yes.
probably a great place to start.
That would be a better place to start.
So the meeting was public health. Theresa Tam called it. And the whole point of the meeting is there was some information in the States about this avian bird flu crossing over. It's now infected some cows and some cow milk and the first human being. Oh my gosh, the news has gone crazy about avian flu in cow's milk, mRNA in cow's milk. Don't be drinking raw milk. Don't. And it's funny because they put this out and all of a sudden raw milk sales went through the roof because people are now onto the government. They know if they say don't do something, then do exactly what they're telling you not to do.
Exactly right.
So Canada very much likes to domino effect off of what's going on in the US. And so they are now piggybacking. And this meeting happened May 9th. So it wasn't this week. It happened on May 9th. And they were piggybacking off of the news stories down in the States. And they decided to have a meeting to get ahead of this flu that's infecting the dairy milk now that has been passed on from birds. So this meeting's about what do we do?
H5N1, and we've got a show we've been trying to schedule it for a couple of weeks now. Ed Embry, farmer researcher, is going to come on the show and he's going to explain exactly how this is being passed along, if a virus exists at all, and that's kind of up for grabs. But so H5N1, it's going to come in through cows. They're going to have to test milk. It's not avian per se. It's an avian strain that's gone into bovine. Our take on it is this is their way of attacking meat and scarcifying our food supply again. Here it is 2024. 2025 is a goal year. So they need to do something drastic. And obviously they're going to try and pull the pandemic cycle again. And they've slaughtered millions of chickens in the name of avian flu in the past.
Yeah.
So this is a great way for them to control our food supply. So there, and then also I think it should be pointed out that I used to work for the government, and everybody in the government thinks they're super important. And I didn't last long, by the way. I don't even think
they had your number before
I didn't make my
even
6-month probationary period because I didn't suit the culture. So, and that was basically like I was skeptical of everything the government was doing, and I was on social media trying to justify the government's position. And what they do is they take studies and they convince everybody in the government that all the studies are right, so all the government's on board. But here are these people who were super important during the pandemic. They were super important. I'm too busy to talk. I'm too busy to do this. Oh, we're making policies. Oh, we're affecting people. We're doing everything. And now they've been sitting around doing nothing. And the idea of another pandemic to make them feel super important, trust me, this is a culture thing, and this is part of their motivation.
Well, they haven't been doing nothing. They've been figuring out how they can fear porn us again into doing the next vaccination schedule, because vaccinations have gone down with people and boosters and all that. People just aren't buying it anymore.
Sure as hell didn't look like they're planning from this meeting. It's the biggest thing Michael Shearer gets into it is that you're not organized enough.
No, they're not. They're busy looking for the next pandemic. They're waiting for the states or somebody else to release something that they could jump onto, get ahead of, and domino effect off of the states.
Yeah, they're just waiting. They're just going from meeting to meeting, waiting for the next death knell. Okay, so this is Michael Shearer. Michael Shearer was the head of the Ontario Cancer Clinic for many, many years. Now he's the head of the Ontario Board of Health. He's quiet in the backgrounds, but also went to Oxford, had a Rhodes Scholar. And Rhodes Scholars are globalist red flags. So we're not saying that means anything, but it doesn't not mean anything.
It definitely means something if you watch the entire meeting, because he doesn't put up his hand and wait his turn to be called on. He actually just talks right over top of Tam, and she stops and listens and lets him.
Yeah, he's in charge.
So he's definitely in charge.
Yeah. All right. So here's his take on the organizational structure.
The response to this crosses agriculture and human surveillance and human disease. And I think nationally we need that, and provincially we need that, so that we're seen to be providing a coordinated response to this. I'm worried that very quickly we will be doing different things in different provinces when we get a positive milk sample. And I don't believe, from what I've heard today, we're prepared. I don't think we're coordinated. We don't have a plan of what's going to happen, and this could happen very quickly. So I think we do need clear communication nationally and provincially across agriculture and human surveillance here, and I don't see it.
So to put that in context, we're playing that part out of sequence. They went heavy into explaining that there is no evidence. And so he didn't say if we get a milk sample. He's like, when we get a milk sample, we need to have a coordinated effort on make sure that our messaging is exactly the same.
But not only that, we need to have the same actions happening from province to province to province, because we know during the pandemic that the response was not the same from province to province to province. Some provinces locked down right away. Some provinces instituted curfews. Other provinces instituted red, green, yellow zones. And other provinces waited almost a half year before they said, oh, you have to wear a mask. Oh, wait a minute, you can't go outside. Oh, you can still have Christmas, but you can't have Christmas because you're in this province and we're in this province. So this time they want a more coordinated response. So they're going to get ahead of the game so that when they get finally a positive test, they'll be ready to go, ready to roll out whatever oppression they are going to extract on us at that point in time.
Right. So here's Donald Shepard. He is the head virologist. That guy over at BC CDC. And just in case you've forgotten who BC CDC is, they're the ones who suggested glory holes during the pandemic. So they have no problem legislating ridiculousness in your bedroom. Don't regulate my ovaries.
I can't wait to see what they're going to come out with this time.
Yeah. Anyway, so here's Don Shepard talking about how they're starting with testing on beef.
Yeah, and in fact, in the U.S., they've had very little testing of non-lactating dairy. What they have done is all negative, including ground beef surveys.
All negative.
But no one has gotten great surveys. Of course, you all know that this has been largely found in mammary epithelial cells, and so there is actually a reason why it might be less prevalent in beef cattle, but Beef cattle are not exclusively male. So it isn't a zero. The other thing is they've opened an asymptomatic cow testing pathway and a testing at slaughter pathway to start getting at that asymptomatic cow reservoir. And that, I don't have numbers for you yet as to how many cows have been tested in there, but I think we're approaching a dozen total symptomatic cows now that have been tested and have all tested negative. Jason, it's 9 states, 36 herds, don't know the number of cows in the US, assuming that's what the end of that text I didn't see was.
So we don't have a positive.
No.
We've tested 9 states.
No positives.
36 herds.
Yeah.
Only 12 cows out of all of those cows actually showed any possible symptoms. And
All
yet
negative.
They all tested negative.
And he says, well, how many cows are infected? Well, it's herds. It's herds of cows. So we can't find symptoms in the symptomatic cows. So we're going to go to slaughterhouses and we're going to start testing asymptomatic meat.
Dairy milk.
Well, no, the slaughterhouses, right? So,
yeah. Okay.
We'll get to the milk. And so basically, I don't know if we explained this properly, but they're saying H1N1 avian flu has jumped to cattle and it gets in the milk, and that's how it gets transferred to people. That's what they're saying. Even though there's only been one case of a person with H5N1, they can't guarantee it came from the milk. They're testing now. They can't find anything in symptomatic cows, so they're going to go to asymptomatic slaughterhouses. Asymptomatic, what did we learn? Wasn't a thing during the last pandemic. So they're here, they are touting that, ringing that bell again.
Yeah. But I love that they're saying it's in cows with mammary glands. And, male cows don't have mammary glands, and beef cattle are not exclusively male. I love that they stay away from saying female cows. It's just cows with mammary glands, cows that produce milk, and not all beef cows are male.
Mm-hmm.
Is he suggesting transgender cows have mammary
some
glands?
cows identify as having udders or some bulls.
I don't know. But anyway, the fact that they are struggling so hard to find something, to find anything, that now it's not just cows with symptoms, it's all cows, regardless of symptoms, regardless of no symptoms, because even those with symptoms don't appear to be testing positive.
Right. Exactly. So here's some lady. You can read her credit on there. I just want to go into this really quickly. She's talking about getting funding and see where she's getting the funding from.
We are connected with the Animal Health Center from a genomics perspective. So they're doing a lot of their animal PCR testing, and we're also supporting their avian influenza testing. For surveillance purposes, and we have set up a cloud-based environment so that Animal Health is able to access their genomics data and be able to analyze that. So we're in conversation with Genome BC to seek additional funding, and they're very keen on giving us money. They're basically their request is a one-pager in bullet form with a very fast turnaround time. So we're looking at that.
So there they are, buzzword PCR, talking about genomes and genome testing. Now, we went into this. We went into this with eugenics. We went into this with the World Population Conference. We've been talking about this forever. Genomes is another secret way of talking about eugenics.
Your DNA,
mapping
your
genomes, mapping
chromosomes.
seeds, saving the best, getting rid of the worst.
Exactly. So it sounds like H5N1, they just really want to take more DNA samples of cows, of beef, and now they're talking about, the birds and possibly into slaughterhouses, and eventually they'll talk about humans. But did you catch which tool it is that they're going to test until they find the H5N1 strain? They're going to use the PCR test. And we all know the PCR test, they're just going to keep running it at higher and higher numbers until they finally find a number that catches a glimpse of the H5N1, and then they'll go to town with their marketing campaigns that they are strategically putting together as we speak. But to date, they have not found the number that will give them, in Canada anyway, they have not found the number that will give them that positive, whether it's an asymptomatic cow or a symptomatic cow.
Right. So why would Genome BC be so keen on mapping genomes and getting ahead of this thing? Well, here might be a clue. Margaret Peggy Johnson, whoever that guy is former senior program officer for the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. And then Genome Canada, Jennifer Gardy, is deputy director over at the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. So the very people who want to map those genomes and the very people who want to find H1N1 are the very people who are going to make money off the vaccines when they come out. No wonder they want to fund it.
And it didn't take us long to follow the money.
No, you really don't have to be an investigative genius to follow that one out.
No, because they gave it to us.
Exactly.
Oh, and BC Genome wants to give us money. And the application, very easy to fill out. It's only one page. One page.
Right. So they are talking about PCR tests all the way through that. They're talking basically how do we test for something that's not there? That's kind of the gist of what they're saying. We want to test on people that there's really no person infected. We want to test on cows, but we're not getting any positives. So we're going to go after the milk, but that's also a bit of a problem.
So wastewater is something we've looked at. We've talked to some experts. I'll be very clear that we can do wastewater. We can detect H5N1 in wastewater. We don't know where that H5N1 in wastewater has come from. Guillaume tells me in a very detailed conversation that the sequences that are robust enough, or that are robust enough, stable enough for us to detect out of wastewater are not variable between avian origin strains and the bovine strains. So we would not be able to determine if this was environmental contamination from avian source, bovine source, or milk dumping, as has been the case in the US, or frankly, even human source, based on the sequences that we would be obtaining. So the challenge really is not so much one of could we do it, it's how would we do it, what would the use case be, what would the question be that we're trying to answer, and watching carefully, because if there's sufficient sequence divergence over time between these various isolates, that may not be, that may evolve to a place where we could actually distinguish them.
So he's basically saying like wastewater is not an accurate way of testing for this stuff. So it's inherently flawed because you can't discern between the different kind of
where it came from.
And the different strains and whatnot. So it's not really a way you want to test, is what he prefaced that with.
But at this point, the bottom line is we're viewing milk sampling as the equivalent to wastewater sampling, frankly, as a way to do large-scale population testing in a sort of an unbiased manner.
So basically, it doesn't work, but we're going to do it with milk.
We're going to do it. And this way, you can't pinpoint as well. Very important. You can't pinpoint which individual farms it came from. And you can't pinpoint either whether it actually came from a cow, from a pig, from a bird, from the chemicals in the sky, from a human being, or from the way that they dump the milk that they find going through the tubes isn't quite up to par or up to resale value. So then why even bother? That's the question. Why even bother?
Well, and if testing milk is like waste milk, the milk they dump, if that's the same equivalent, then why would you do a flawed test? So, but they're relying heavily on the heads of agriculture and the Canadian Food Inspection Agency to work with the farms to get the information that they need.
But also they were complaining that the CFIA is not giving public health detailed information. So they are really ticked that CFIA is, one, protecting the farmers, sort of protecting the farmers, but 2, not giving them information to go after the farmers and not giving them enough information that they can perfect their surveillance on the human population to figure out who in the human population might get it or possibly pass it forward.
Yeah, they're saying they're having trouble getting it from the CFIA, Canadian Food Inspection Agency, but they're also talking about the farmers.
Yes.
And this is why I wanted to play this clip.
The biggest concern is the communications, like Michelle was talking about, and the notification from CFIA so that we can actually have contact with the farm families and workers. That has been an ongoing issue where they've refused to give us the information, and it's made it very challenging in trying to connect with the farm workers for the poultry farms that we've had. But Jason, I'll turn it over to you.
Well, that does my heart good. That means the farms are not cooperating with the governments because they don't trust them.
That's right. And then the Canadian Food and Inspection Agency is not going to give them specific details on if they find anything anyway, and they're hiding it under the guise that, well, we just get a whole bunch of milk in, so we really don't know which farm it comes from anyway, which is pissing off public health because they really want to do more surveillance on the migrant workers, on the farm families themselves. And so I can
which are the very reasons the farms are not cooperating. They don't want the government in. And also there's a big push now because BC was the first one to tell the farms that they had to register their animals. And that even with hobby animals, so you hadn't had to register your animals, but if you want to sell milk, you have to be registered and you have to have a license and you have to send it in to get pasteurized and all that stuff. Same thing with eggs. But even hobby farms, they were saying you need to register your hobby goats and your hobby chickens, and everybody was like, do not do that because they're going to come and slaughter your animals one day.
Exactly.
And so they've been fighting it for about a year and a half now.
So this might be the way that they find, one, because the CFIA is not collecting individual farm information, 2, because they're testing everything the same way that they do wastewater, so they don't have specific details as to where the strain may have come from, and 3, they're not able, because they don't know which specific farms, they don't know which people to now pull blood samples from and to test and where to set up their surveillance cameras. So we might actually see, because the CFIA is not refusing to cooperate, but refusing to give detailed information, we might actually see a whole ban on cattle, period. Or we may see another forced vaccination program because they don't know where. So nobody's safe until everybody's safe. And no beef is safe until all the beef is safe. And no milk is safe until all the milk is safe. We may see that same kind of rhetoric coming down the pipe with this, all because they haven't been able to find in the individual farms in the states that they've tested, they haven't been able to find a single strain. And they haven't also been able to find a single strain in the wastewater way that they're testing the milk.
No, exactly right. And I just a note, I think we're on like our 200th show or something. I stopped counting at some point. But on our 6th show, we had Charles Hoff on, and there was a big FOI dump, and it included Bonnie Henry. And basically, Bonnie Henry, we did a clip, and that clip went totally viral, like on our 6th show, of showing that Bonnie Henry received an email at 11:30 in the morning, and that was saying like there is big red flags with AstraZeneca, and people are having anaphylactic shock on a higher level than ever expected. I mean, this is bad.
And blood clots.
Yeah, and Bonnie Henry gets on at 2:00 in that same afternoon.
I thought it was a half hour later, like 34 minutes.
No, it was in the
later.
afternoon.
Mm.
And she gets on and she says, yeah, we looked at AstraZeneca, no safety signals whatsoever. So
Safe and effective.
3 hours later, 2 hours later, went on and lied straight out to the public. So when Bonnie Henry talks about proper communication, she's basically saying we need to figure out how to lie our way through this next one.
Exactly. Senior Canuck is saying the next scare will be some sort of a radionucleotide in the food to destroy the food supply chain.
Probably. something, yeah, that's crazy enough to work, because this
Right?
H5N1, after we get through with them, and this has gone so public that there's no way they can pull this crap. So we saved the best one for last. Now, when we said breaking news, we were being kind of sarcastic that the government lies. This is, watch how a lie is broken down. And we've been saying this with OSFI. They make up the science, and then they make policies around the science. And we've said this, I don't know how many
It's
times.
all based on lies,
Yeah.
modeling, assumptions,
Modeling,
not evidence.
Modeling, made up experiments, like not real world stuff. Just we've been touting this horn for like 2 months now.
Mhm.
Watch it in real time. Watch this in real time.
There are two things that are being done with milk: experimental studies to validate pasteurization efficacy and effectiveness that has been done in the US.
Experimental studies to prove that pasteurization is effective. So if it was effective, why do you have to make up experiments to prove pasteurization? And in case you're not big on the raw milk thing, there are a lot of people who say, oh, no, pasteurization is bad. It kills all of the important,
good stuff
Yeah, all the
that your body actually
microbiomes,
needs.
yeah. So
those are being done in benchtop simulated conditions, because we're still level 3 restricted at this point.
The samples that will be batch tested, is it pasteurized milk or not pasteurized?
Yeah.
We should preface that. I skipped the part where he says we're testing 300 samples across Canada.
Yes.
And this guy says, is it all pasteurized milk?
Only pasteurized at this point. Should we find it's actually it's a good point that there's a big information evidence gap, that no one's actually tested in egg culture.
Evidence gap.
The-
He passed over that like pretty quickly.
But you know what? Evidence gap is something that they mention throughout the entire
Yeah,
Zoom.
brought up a
There's
lot.
so many evidence gaps, and they don't care. They're still going forward.
Unpasteurized milk yet, or if they're doing it, they haven't released the results to prove that those ridiculously low CT values are actually representative of live virus that we're all assuming it is.
Assuming that it's bad for you.
But assuming that the H5N1 is from these live fibers that are found in raw milk that they've never tested.
Right. So they've never tested it. They're testing pasteurized milk, and they're
Only.
also making up experiments, made up modeling to prove pasteurization works.
And certainly fits with the epidemiology, because we think it's milk is the vehicle of transmission. So it's an excellent point. And if we find positives, obviously, we'll make sure we do that if no one else has done it. Obviously, there's a lot of messaging that will have to happen with that, starting with the fact that we told you when we were doing this that all the evidence suggests that milk is safe, even if we detect RNA.
What if we detect RNA? What, it's bad in milk, but it's safe in vaccines?
No. He says mRNA is safe in pasteurized milk,
Right.
but not in raw milk.
Well, if it's safe in a vaccine, it should be safe in raw milk too, should it not?
You would think.
You would think.
We are doing this to try and understand the burden of disease. Milk is still safe if it's pasteurized, but doubling down on the non-pasteurized milk messaging, which obviously is something we've been doing already.
So he's just saying he doesn't have scientific studies. And so now he's...
No. He says we are doubling down on the unpasteurized milk, even though we have no studies. We've never tested it. We have no idea if it's good for you, bad for you, whether it carries live disease, doesn't carry live disease, carries H5N1 or doesn't. But we are going to double down on the messaging that nobody should be drinking raw milk because you're going to get sick. Only drink pasteurized milk, even if we find mRNA in pasteurized milk, because it's safe in pasteurized milk. But we are doubling down on the message that RNA milk from raw milk is not good for you. It's only good for you if it's pasteurized. effing believable.
But it's not even that. It's the microbiomes. It is the live cultures. There's a lot of health benefits to raw milk. I mean, people had been drinking it for years and years and years and decades, centuries before the government came along. And the Dutch still drink raw milk, and they leave their eggs out. By the way, they're unpasteurized eggs. They don't put them in the fridge. You buy them off the warm shelves in the supermarkets.
And they can sit on your counter for 6 months. It doesn't matter. They don't go bad.
When they're not pasteurized.
They have filled us with so much bullshit. And here they are comfortably sitting there discussing how they haven't tested anything. They found zero evidence of anything, but we're going to double down on the messaging that raw milk is no good for you.
Because we assume it's bad for you.
We assume it's bad for you. Not because we know, because we assume it's bad for you. Because actually we want everybody drinking pasteurized milk, which we throw chemicals in and all kinds of other shit in there that is not good for your body. All the extra estrogen and this, that, and the next thing. Who knows what they're throwing in there? But we do know they're putting RNA in there, and that's okay to drink from your pasteurized milk, but not okay from your raw milk.
Yeah,
it's so disgusting how evil.
Well, I know. Yeah, I mean, it's from glory holes to pasteurization lines. I'd like to see somebody who is lactose intolerant drink some raw milk and see what happens.
I bet you they'd be fine.
I bet you they would be fine. However, don't do that because we've said that. We're not doctors, and that's an assumption.
Yes.
So don't take our word for that. But see how honest that is? It's not so hard to say. You know, we're not going to double down on that message now.
But then they started talking about as well other animals. Well, shoot, if we can't find it in the cows and we can't find it in the birds and we're not finding it in humans, we need to now start testing the swines. They brought up testing swines. I don't know how many times. Maybe we can find something in the pork products. So let's kill the pork industry while we're killing the bird industry, while we're killing the cow industry. And while we're at it, there are a lot of goat cheeses out there that aren't pasteurized either. And Tam, I don't know how many times she said, I don't eat cheese, so it doesn't matter to me. But they're now also looking at going after your goats because people who are lactose intolerant drink goat's milk. And a lot of cheese is made from goat's milk. So they're also talking about now, if we can't find it in the cows, we can't find it in the swines, we can't find it in the humans, we can't find it in the birds, we need to test now the goats as well and lock those suckers down because people eat goats and they drink the goat's milk and they eat the cheese.
Right.
So we need to take down the entire dairy industry, whether it is from goats or cows, and somehow I guess the pigs with their mammary glands are involved somehow as well.
And cats. And
and
farm
pets.
cats. Yeah, because they drink that tainted milk.
They tainted the milk that they must dump. And anybody who knows anything about dairy farming, once you reach a certain quota, they make you dump the milk. You're not allowed to sell it. You have to dump it. So Tam is saying, well, you know, all the other pets on the farm, pets, mostly cats, but you've got dogs and ducks and who knows what other pets on the farm drink that dumped milk because we don't know how they're dumping it. So that dumped milk might also be the reason for the tainting and the H5N1 that is going to spread through the country and kill everybody. We need a vaccine to save everybody.
Didn't mean to trip up your rant.
That's
there.
okay.
So do we know why they dump all that extra milk for a quota? Like, is it because if they have all that, it'll just go bad? Why is that? Does anyone know the answer to that? Because it seems to me if you were to just produce all the milk and lower the price of milk, more people would drink milk.
But it's not even about lowering the price of milk. It's about quotas.
No, it's about stabilizing the price. It's about the mafia, supply and demand.
Exactly. That's what I think it's about.
They claim the dairy farmers wouldn't be able to afford to produce dairy if they allowed that to happen, is one of the pretexts.
It's sort of true, kind of, because if they're giving their milk away at a lower price, then they're already on bad margins, right? That was set up by the government. So
it's supply and demand, though. Everybody drinks milk. Everybody uses, or I shouldn't say everybody, but almost everybody drinks milk or uses cheese or whatever. That milk, it's like gas. And we see what they do with the gas prices. Everybody uses it. Everybody needs it. It's essential to so many products. The price isn't going to go down.
Should maybe figure a way to run your car on milk.
Maybe.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe.
It probably can be done. Get on it. Get on it, freedom scientists.
It's the same tactic from the diamond industry. Apparently, like one company owns all the diamonds and they hoard them away. If every
Weird.
diamond that was already unearthed from the earth was in circulation, they'd be worth pencils.
Yes.
It's so crazy. But, you know, like I said, they also talked about surveillance. And we know that we know they've set up surveillance cameras everywhere. But in the rural communities, I'm guessing it's a little bit harder to set up surveillance cameras. But if you can use the example
Michael
of
disagrees.
if you can use the example of we need to surveil the farms to see how the farmers are dumping the milk and what animals are drinking that milk, now they've got reason to put cameras on the farms. They also went so far as to talk about how farmers are untrusting of government officials. So how can we surveil the farms and get on the farms and test the animals and test the milk and test the dumping? And test the migrant workers and the farm hands and the farmers' families and friends that come to the farm. How do we get on there and do that if the CFIA won't share information with public health and if the farmers won't allow government officials because they don't trust government officials because we've caught them already tainting farmers' land. Wasn't it in Saskatchewan or something? They were caught dumping stuff on farmers' lands and harming the wastewater.
Yes.
Or I mean the pond water, sorry. So there's a huge distrust of the government and they're having trouble understanding how they can overcome that with the farmers. So how do we get the surveillance in there? Who can we work with? Who can we get funding from? And how can we scare the shit out of people with our fear propaganda so that they'll let us on their farms and let us poke their animals and let us cull their animals because we can't do testing to pinpoint which animals are releasing this. And from as far as I'm concerned, it's probably just gain of function anyway. They know exactly who's got what and how, because they're the ones probably releasing it, just like their gain of function seems to be the issue with every other disease that we are now becoming aware of and educated on.
Well, I think it's, always important to remember that it's not any one thing. They're working on several different things at one time. Is it a play to control our food? Sure. Is it a play to kill animals and get more surveillance over the farms? Sure. Is the threat of another pandemic to get them to comply part of the problem? Yeah, sure it is. So it's a few things. But if you listen to Ed, it seems like another manufactured thing. And again, there's still people maintaining that there's no actual virus isolated other than outside of a lab made up setting, right? So
well, the fact even in this meeting, they said, we haven't found anything. We're going to keep looking until we find something, and we're going to use the PCR test to do it.
Yes, exactly. And so that other guy was confident when we find contaminated milk. Well, maybe because no evidence so far has said that you will.
Exactly. Even in animals that were displaying the symptoms that they are connecting to the H5N1, even in those animals, they still couldn't find it.
Right. Now they're saying in the States, it wasn't a big deal. Nobody was really paying attention. And then it jumped to people. And I think it was 1 or 2 cases maybe. And then all of a sudden the news was starting to pick it up. Right. Again, the news are sitting around there waiting for a big thing. I mean, that was just like news that wrote itself for 3 years. How easy is that?
Exactly.
Clickbait. So.
And now they did go to a couple of representatives from the different provinces. Good on you, Quebec. Your public health guy said, yeah, we're not concerned. We're not doing anything. There's nothing been found. There's no evidence of anything. There's too many evidence gaps. There's too many assumptions being made. We're not doing nothing. We don't care. We're not on board with this. But Ontario, Kieran Moore, he was right on there. Oh, Ontario is leading the way. We have already set up a task force, and that task force is working with the emergency management plan in order to make sure that we are ready to go when we finally find something. We are ready. We are communicating. We are communicating with cabinet ministers on this. We are ready to put in the emergency management plan. You just say go, and we are there. We are ready.
Right.
Thank you, Kieran Moore.
So if you're saying nope, just super easy to surveil the rural areas as well, Michael?
Well, I'm seeing more and more different sensors on the rural roads. Like I shared the story about that one flashing light that started. It was counting cars at the very least, and I know they do that with the road strips. But this is it's subtle. It's secretive. And then there's another one. There's a spot where it was this big. They had it temporary, so it was on wheels, and I'm not sure what it was. Looked some kind of dish, and it was pointing down the hill. And I kept meaning to pull over and take pictures, and then a month later, it's gone. But now there's something similar, just attached, actually, like permanently fixed there.
Oh,
So
interesting. Well,
I'm not sure what it does, but they're.
If you think to take a picture, then awesome.
Yeah, it's a matter of pulling over.
Yeah. So you got something for us, you.
Yeah. So I came across this video from back in 1963, I believe. A gentleman named Paul Harvey.
Paul Harvey. Loved Paul Harvey.
Yeah, he's ABC or was an ABC News radio broadcaster and very well known. But
yeah, he did a 5-minute radio piece once a week called "The Rest of the Story." So he'd tell you part of this bio story, and then he would reveal who it was at the end of the story, so you wouldn't know who he's talking about. It was a great segment.
That's pretty clever. Can't keep you hooked.
Yeah, it was really good, and he's got a great voice, of course, right?
Yes, he's got a voice for radio.
All right, show us your clip.
If I were the devil, if I were the devil, if I were the prince of darkness, I'd want to engulf the whole world in darkness, and I'd have 1/3 of its real estate and 4/5 of its population, but I wouldn't be happy until I had seized the ripest apple on the tree, thee. So I'd set about, however necessary, to take over the United States. I'd subvert the churches first. I'd begin with a campaign of whispers. With the wisdom of a serpent, I would whisper to you as I whispered to Eve, do as you please. To the young, I would whisper that the Bible is a myth. I would convince them that man created God instead of the other way around. I would confide that what's bad is good and what's good is square. And the old I would teach to pray after me, Our Father, which art in Washington. And then I'd get organized. I'd educate authors in how to make lurid literature exciting so that anything else would appear dull and uninteresting. I'd threaten TV with dirtier movies and vice versa. I'd peddle narcotics to whom I could. I'd sell alcohol to ladies and gentlemen of distinction. I'd tranquilize the rest with pills. If I were the devil, I'd soon have families at war with themselves, churches at war with themselves, and nations at war with themselves, until each in its turn was consumed. And with promises of higher ratings, I'd have mesmerizing media fanning the flames. If I were the devil, I would encourage schools to refine young intellects, but neglect to discipline emotions. Just let those run wild. Until before you knew it, you'd have to have drug-sniffing dogs and metal detectors at every schoolhouse door. Within a decade, I'd have prisons overflowing. I'd have judges promoting pornography. Soon I could evict God from the courthouse, then from the schoolhouse, and then from the houses of Congress. And in his own churches, I would substitute psychology for religion and deify science. I would lure priests and pastors into misusing boys and girls and church money. If I were the devil, I'd make the symbol of Easter an egg and the symbol of Christmas a bottle. If I were the devil, I'd take from those who have and give to those who wanted until I had killed the incentive of the ambitious. And what'll you bet? I couldn't get whole states to promote gambling as the way to get rich. I would caution against extremes in hard work, in patriotism, in moral conduct. I would convince the young that marriage is old-fashioned, that swinging is more fun, that what you see on TV is the way to be. And thus I could undress you in public, and I could lure you into bed with diseases for which there is no cure. In other words, if I were the devil, I'd just keep right on doing what he's doing.
Oh. If I were the devil, I'd keep on luring you in with diseases with no cure.
That was in the 1960s. So
63, yeah.
he was hyper aware of what they were doing all the way back then already. What, 1964, you said?
I think 63. Am I muted?
63. Yeah. So hyper aware of what was going on.
Pretty much everything he touched on in that montage or monologue has happened, and more prominently so in the last 4 to 10 years.
Right. Now, I don't know if that was like G. Edward Griffin did a thing on communism and the Marxist takeover, and he did that. His was 1969, I believe.
This was 65, sorry. Just to correct
65. And now I'm not sure if that was the McCarthy era, but people were hyper aware of communism and how communism works back then. So maybe he's prophetic, or maybe he just saw what they were already doing and called it accurately. But holy cow, because all of that stuff has come true, right?
Exactly.
But none of that was happening back then. None of it. You didn't have kids with drug sniffing dogs. They didn't have metal detectors. They didn't have all the things like that was not going on when he was calling that out.
My question is this.
Yeah.
Because we know the media was a big part of their plans, and the last time they tried it back after World War II, they forgot about the media portion of it.
Correct.
And now then they decided to correct that with the Vietnam War, right?
Yes.
So that was around that time frame. So Paul Harvey, being media, was he brought in on some of these secret society meetings, hence why he knew what they were going to do. And he was a media personality that actually had some couth and some morals and some ethics. So he put it out there in a monologue that wouldn't necessarily get him fired, but he could feel good about telling the people what was going to happen.
Right, because it was 72 that Order of the Barbarians came out, and he had, it came out in 80, 89 or something like that. So it was 69 to 71 that he was talking about the talk. So they were revealing the plans in a big way at that time. So that's a very plausible theory. Yeah.
I'm surprised he kept his job for so long. He didn't retire till 2008, so he mustn't have been talking like that often.
Well, I think they had a period where nobody even thought about it, and then people were starting to think about it, and they called it out. But they had this period where, like, go ahead, because nobody's going to believe you. And then they had a period where they were just killing everybody off for revealing anything. And now we're in a period, it's like, well, what do we care? We own the judicial system. We own the police system. Nothing's going to happen anyway. We've written all these laws that there's no accountability. So they don't really care anymore.
They don't care. But at the same time, anybody who stands in their way or gets a little too close to the X, they do have accidents.
Well, that's the thing. Reveal too much too quick, and then they still have a problem. But I mean, just calling this stuff out now, they're not going to care. They're not going to care because nobody thinks you're crazy anymore. Well, some people do. Those people, they ruminate in their masks all day, but those people, don't count.
Don't count.
So, but people, like we were saying with the Bilderbergers and Trilateral Commission back in the early 90s to mid 90s, nobody even believed that those things existed. And they all denied that they were even doing these meetings. And then all of a sudden now they're just like, yeah, we attend them. They don't care anymore. They think they've won already, right? So,
but here we are. We got to attend a meeting completely by accident, or was it? So we really do need to say thank you to Christine Massey for getting possibly an unintended invite to a meeting and thinking in advance to actually record that meeting and share it out with the masses and take down government lies ahead of them being able to propagate them. So thank you for sharing that with us.
Right.
We truly appreciate it. And the person, Dr. Sam Bailey, who did the
Dr.
Substack.
sambailey.substack.com if you want to actually go and see that whole meeting for yourselves. A lot of it's just fairly boring, mundane stuff, but there were definitely a good few nuggets, and we missed a couple actually. So
So thank you for joining us yet again. It is Thursday, so we do have the weekend coming up, and I hope you have an incredible weekend planned with family and friends and making memories. I know they're still camping out on Highway 11 with their signs and their banners. Feel free to join them as they try and get information out. I think there's a few other things happening this weekend. We were tagged to work all weekend, and we probably still will, just not doing the work we had originally anticipated.
Right. So work.
Any events you're going to, Michael, this weekend?
I'll be at the Druthers house this weekend working on the June issue.
Oh, good for you.
Yes, Michael does the layouts for the Druthers for them right before going to print. So
doing the Lord's work over there.
That's right.
That's good. And you know what? Our friend Bakerman called and said you frequent Camp 11 quite a bit, actually.
No, I've only made it once.
Oh, okay. He said you shined the laser light on one of their signs on the side of the highway. And now they're cracking down on signs on the highway. So I wonder if you did that. I wonder if you were the cause of that, you dirty disruptor. So
It wasn't for long enough, but I got a few videos.
Okay.
It's all good.
The rest of their signage, they don't need the laser.
Yeah, fair enough. Anyway, well, go bring your signs down there because they're cracking on signs now.
That's right. So thank you to everyone for doing what you're doing, staying diligent, staying on top of information, sharing out information, and doing what you can to make Canada great again.
All right, everybody. Good night. We will see you Monday. Bye. God. Good night,